The year the National College entrance exams were reinstated, young educated youth across the country eagerly prepared for university. But he had to give up on the exam due to his unwavering commitment to his job. While others carried large bags, heading for major cities across the country, he could only shoulder over 100 pounds of film projection equipment, traveling through rugged mountain paths. At 3:30 in the afternoon, Wang Gui turned off the radio, took 2 Fenbid pills, and dragged his old, aching legs outside. As he passed the door, he grabbed a set of keys off the hook, opened the beat-up van in the yard, and took stock of the relics inside. A 16mm Chongzheng projector, a yellowed screen, and hundreds of old film reels. "Ah, Gui, someone's here to see you," a rough voice called from outside. Wang Gui ignored it. Only after checking that all the film reels were accounted for did he turn around. 2 people were standing at the gate. One was his cousin, who ran errands at the county government, and the other was a young man with glasses, a stranger. The young man wore a suit and tie, holding a briefcase, and politely said, "Hello, I'm Ma Tao, Secretary to Director Zhao from the County Cultural Bureau." Secretary to Director Zhao. Hello. Director Zhao was a good official. After taking office last year, he immediately started seeking sponsorships to build a museum, aiming to boost tourism in Mudo County. Wang Gui often praised him to the children in the mountains, saying their county would soon have its own museum. But he had never met his new boss before. Now the secretary had come to see him. Truly a good official. Wang Gui eagerly extended a hand, rough like tree bark. Secretary Ma subtly avoided the gesture and approached the old van. "So this is our county's mobile movie projection van?" "Ah, yes, that's it. Old and worn out. Everything makes noise except the speakers." Wang Gui joked, trying to hide his nervous heartbeat. Was Director Zhao's secretary here to give him a new van? Secretary Ma rummaged through the van and nodded in satisfaction. He then pulled out a document from his briefcase. "It's like this. The museum in Mudo County is now complete. The county has decided to add these items to its collection. This is the requisition order." What the? Although Secretary Ma was speaking in standard Mandarin, Wang Gui couldn't quite grasp it. It was only after his cousin explained that he understood. The items in his van were considered antiques and were to be put in the museum. Wang Gui was taken aback. Nonsense. These are still usable. How can they be antiques? Secretary Ma shook his head, insisting that the value of the items lay in their historical significance as symbols of cultural enlightenment in Liangshan. Whether they were still usable or not, they needed to be preserved for future generations. That's ridiculous. Perfectly good things shouldn't be locked away for people to look at. They should be used to show movies to people. Wang Gui protested. Secretary Ma adjusted his glasses, explaining that displaying these items in the museum had great educational value. Tourists could directly witness the nation's care and support for the people of Liangshan. Bull. The nation's care isn't for tourists to see. Go back and tell Director Zhao that I'm still using these things. He shouldn't think about taking them. Wang Gui rudely sent them packing, then started up his old van and rumbled down the road. The village he needed to visit that day was 3 hours away from the county seat. If he were late, the villagers would start to worry. Wang Gui was Mudo County's only mobile movie projectionist. In 1968, when Wang Gui was swept from the heavy industrial province of northern China to the remote depths of Liangshan by the tides of the era, he hadn't expected to settle there. In 1972, the government, in an effort to enrich the cultural lives of people deep in Liangshan, distributed a set of movie projection equipment to the county. The county had gathered all the young educated youth to discuss how to use the equipment. When the first movie was screened in the open space in front of the government office, the entire county of Mudo was ecstatic. As the only young person who knew how to operate the projector, Wang Gui naturally became Mudo County's first movie projectionist. This self-recommendation freed him from the heavy labor in the fields and secured him a position with the county's cultural office. But the job, though it looked easy, was far from that in practice. His first mobile projection van assigned by the county was just a small pushcart. It took him nearly half a day to push it to the village closest to the county seat. When he encountered rivers or bridges, he had to carry the equipment across one by one and then haul the cart over. At his first screening in the village, children ran around in front of the screen, casting shadows that frightened the elderly into screaming, believing him to be a sorcerer stealing their souls. If he hadn't spoken a bit of he might have been beaten to death on the spot. He fled that night. But when he set up the screen in the next village, people from the first village followed in droves, eager to tell the neighboring villagers about the miraculous scenes they had witnessed the night before, even before the movie started. That night, the second village also hailed him as a god, sending him off with a cartload of buckwheat cakes and flowers. For the sake of that cartload of flowers back then, he wouldn't let the people of Mudo County wait in vain now. Tonight, he was headed to Jiawu village. As soon as the broken van rolled into the village, it was surrounded by a group of dirty kids. Wang Gui handed out candy to the children, but quickly realized that the boy he had promised to watch The Lion King with, Abu, was missing. "Where's Abu?" Wang Gui asked while unloading the van. The kids all chimed in at once, saying that Abu's grandmother was sick and couldn't walk. Wang Gui's heart sank. Locking the van, he headed toward Abu's house. Abu was a pitiful child. His parents had originally gone to the city to work, and after he was born, they sent him back to the mountains to be raised by his grandmother. At first, his parents occasionally visited, but when Abu turned 3, they suddenly lost contact and never returned. His grandmother missed her son so much that she cried herself blind. Abu had since become her eyes, her crutch, and her guiding light. When it was time for Abu to attend school, the volunteer teacher came looking for him. But after just one day, Abu refused to go back because his grandmother had fallen and hurt her elbow while home alone. When she realized Abu wouldn't go to school, she tried to hang herself in despair. After Abu discovered her, he never dared to leave her side again. Every time Wang Gui visited Jiawu village, Abu would always bring him meals made by his grandmother and beg him to help find his parents. Wang Gui had already learned that Abu's father had been crushed to death at a construction site and his mother had run off with the compensation money, but he couldn't bring himself to tell them. If he said nothing, the grandmother and grandson still had hope. If he told them the truth, she might not survive it. Wang Gui stepped over the threshold into Abu's home and saw the boy cooking. A black pot hung over the gathered firewood, boiling wild greens, and a few slices of cured meat. When Abu saw Wang Gui, he quickly tossed the fire stick aside and pulled him into the house. Inside, it was pitch dark. The withered old woman lay on the bed, barely clinging to life. Though she was younger than Wang Gui, years of hard labor and malnutrition had aged her beyond her time. Abu explained that his grandmother had collapsed last month. They had called both the local healer and the witch doctor, but both said to prepare for her passing. Wang Gui felt like something was stuck in his throat, unable to tell Abu to come with me to the hospital. Motu County had 169 villages and too many people were suffering. He couldn't help them all. The dying woman sensed Wang Gui's presence and weakly raised a bony hand, gently waving it. Wang Gui paused, understanding her gesture. He held her hand and said, "We're still searching. We'll find them soon. Just hold on a little longer." Only then did the woman settle down, but after a moment, she made a faint sound again. Abu quickly ran outside and brought back a bowl of vegetable soup, overjoyed that his grandmother wanted to eat. Wang Gui's eyes instantly welled up. He pulled out the 100 or so yuan in his pocket and stuffed it into Abu's hands. Abu quietly tucked the money into his inner pocket and, for once, didn't ask about his parents. Wang Gui spoke to him in the Yi language, telling him to take good care of his grandmother and promised to show The Lion King next time. Abu quickly waved his hands, begging for The Butterfly Lovers instead, his grandmother's favorite film. When Wang Gui set up the screen, he saw Abu had carried his grandmother over, wrapping her in a tattered quilt. Wang Gui laid out his military overcoat on the ground for warmth. The two of them stayed by her side, watching the entire movie. By the time they packed up, Wang Gui's legs were so stiff they wouldn't bend. After Wang Gui had driven Secretary Ma away with a scolding, he hadn't returned. A few days later, when Wang Gui thought the matter had blown over, Director Zhao showed up in person. This new leader in his early 40s came with rice and cooking oil, saying he was here to visit a retired employee. After exchanging pleasantries, he finally turned to Secretary Ma. "Has Uncle Gui completed all the paperwork since retiring 7 years ago?" Secretary Ma quickly leafed through some documents, pretending to be thorough. "Looks like there's still some formalities left to handle. The film equipment and reels are still in Uncle Gui's possession." "Oh, I see. Then we'd better finalize the handover soon. We wouldn't want Uncle Gui to be accused of misappropriating public property, now would we?" Wang Gui reached behind a picture frame and pulled out an official note, signed by the previous county mayor. The year he retired, no one had taken his place. The former mayor had granted him special permission to continue his duties until the County Cultural Bureau found a new projectionist. Director Zhao took the note, glanced at it, then handed it to Secretary Ma. When Secretary Ma saw it, he chuckled. "Uncle Gui, the mayor who signed this retired ages ago, and there's still no one to replace you. Isn't it time to accept reality?" "What reality? Am I not still alive? As long as I'm alive, this equipment can't be shut down. If it's shut down, won't it die?" Secretary Ma adjusted his glasses. "Nowadays, with televisions and smartphones everywhere, no one watches movies like this anymore. Young man, you grew up in the city, didn't you? You don't know what a place called the rural mountains of Liangshan is like, do you?" "You're right, I'm a writer. I came down here for poverty alleviation work with Director Zhao. Perhaps you're unaware, but in our literary circles, there's a saying, 'The countryside is dead.'" "Bullshit." Wang Gui cut him off with a swift kick. He threw the gifts that Director Zhao had brought into the yard. He initially wanted to break ties and kick him out, but to his surprise, Director Zhao ended up giving Wang Gui a lesson. Zhao explained that in the rural areas of Liangshan, there were no young people left, only the elderly and children. In a few years, when the children grow up, they too will head to the cities, and by then, the villages will be left with nothing but elderly people on the verge of death. Won't the village just die out? Do the elderly and children not deserve to watch movies? When I showed my first movie, the county head was still a child. You can ask him, would he agree to give up this equipment? Do the elderly and children in the 100+ villages in Michuo County agree? Secretary Ma smiled and said that this was a matter for the Cultural Bureau and Director Zhao was just following regulations. The county head would not interfere. Wang Gui, equally frustrated, laughed and said, "Following regulations should mean assigning someone to take over his job of showing movies, right?" Director Zhao admitted there was nothing he could do. No one wanted the job, and he couldn't force anyone. "Then I'll find someone myself. If I find a replacement, will the people in the mountains still be able to watch movies?" Wang Gui, with his neck stiff, stood his ground. Director Zhao was caught off guard. "In principle, yes, but the Cultural Bureau's staffing is full. Even if someone is willing to take on this job, they will only be a temporary worker." "Temporary worker? So be it." Wang Gui gritted his teeth and made a bet. "Fine, I'll find one myself." Director Zhao smiled. "You can, but there needs to be a deadline by the end of the month. After all, you're getting old, and you're plagued with illnesses. You can't delay this any longer." As soon as Director Zhao left, Wang Gui called his son, asking him to post a job ad. Anyone would do. He would teach them step by step, and he refused to believe he couldn't train someone to show movies. After hearing the whole story, his son advised him not to be so naive. These days, anyone in the mountains who can move has gone to the cities to work. Who would still be willing to do this tough job in the mountains? "Dad, back then, if the county hadn't stopped you, wouldn't you have already gone back to the city to take the university entrance exam?" His son's words hit a sore spot for Wang Gui. In 1978, when the National College entrance exams were reinstated, many sent-down youth across the country were eager to take the exams. Wang Gui, who had always been an excellent student before being sent to the countryside, was asked to give up the exams due to his work that he couldn't let go of. In the years that followed, as he watched others pack their belongings and head to cities across the country, he could only carry over 100 pounds of movie equipment, traversing the rugged mountains. Later, when he told this story to his grandson, who was about to attend university, his grandson looked at him with admiration. "Grandpa, you are the bravest hero of your time." The bravest hero, Wang Gui felt he was undeserving of that title. Back then, he was forced to stay. What right did he have now to ask someone else to walk the same path? Wouldn't that be hurting others? Wang Gui smoked a heavy cigarette, then continued driving his broken-down car down the road. There were over 100 villages, and there wasn't enough time to say goodbye to each one, so he could only gather several villages together for one last screening. Each time he set up the screen, watching the elderly and the children, hand in hand, slowly making their way toward him, he would often shed tears. After all, he was in his 70s, and, according to director Zhao, not far from death. Giving up the mobile cinema business, he didn't know where he should go or what he should do. He could only wait for death. After each screening, when he handed out candy to the children and told them he wouldn't be coming back, the children would freeze. Some children timidly returned the candy, while others clung to his arm and wailed. Even the elderly, who had seen it all, would secretly wipe away their tears. He knew that what these villages were about to lose was not just a distraction that came every few months, but also a source of hope. If people lose hope, the days become hard to endure, and life loses its meaning. Wang Gui had done all he could, had devoted his whole life to this. Now, he was truly powerless. For the last screening, Wang Gui chose the village of Jiawu. He made many preparations for it, buying rice, flour, and cooking oil, and purchasing traditional clothing for the Yi grandmother. Abu's grandmother was still hanging on, but Wang Gui knew she didn't have much time left. When Abu heard that he would no longer come to show movies, he cried and asked why. Wang Gui couldn't explain it to a child, so he just patted his little head and smiled bitterly. "There's nothing I can do. You're too young and I'm too old. If only you had been born a few years earlier and I had aged a little slower, then maybe you could have been my successor." That night, Wang Gui's chronic leg pain flared up again. As he packed the equipment into the car, the pain was unbearable. Abu was helping by his side the entire time, so Wang Gui had to pretend nothing was wrong. It wasn't until he drove out of Jiawu village that he pulled over by the roadside and howled at the bright moon like a wounded beast. When he got home, he drank himself into a stupor while eating mushroom and cured meat hot pot that Imo had prepared for him. As she poured him more wine, Imo shared some good news. Their son knew he wouldn't be showing movies anymore and would come to pick them up to move to the city tomorrow. Their grandson was about to graduate and already had a girlfriend at school. He might get married after graduation. Their son said Wang Gui should move to the city to rest and take care of his health, so he could go back to the northeast with their grandson and his wife to honor their ancestors. In the future, he'd even take their great-grandson. Through his drunken haze, Wang Gui looked at his wife, a woman who had never left Liangshan her whole life but had a deeper longing for the city than he did. What year was it when he first brought her to the county town? Wang Gui couldn't quite remember. But he would never forget that moment when she rode into his dorm on his ox cart and immediately tried to kneel before him. It was heart-wrenching. The children from the mountains, they truly suffered too much. Wang Gui downed his last glass of liquor, reached out to touch his wife's wrinkled cheek, but then wobbled and fell onto the Kong. In his dreams, he saw all the roads he had traveled, the people he had met, and the shining eyes of those in front of the big screen. His first year showing movies had taken him across Liangshan for a full year. The most unforgettable screening was in a small town. It happened to coincide with a market day, and the mountain villagers spread the word throughout the market several times. By sunset, families had come from all the surrounding mountains, filling the open space he had chosen. People sat on woodpiles, rooftops, and even in trees. Afterward, the town mayor told him that over 5,000 people had watched the movie that night, and not a single security incident occurred. He knew it was because everyone had been captivated by the images on the screen, a world they had never seen before. At first, they were skeptical. Then they believed, accepted, and finally empathized. They pointed at the people on the screen, crying and laughing with them. The light that shone in their once hopeless eyes because of the movie was the greatest reward for Wang Gui's entire life. But now, he could no longer show movies, nor could he bring them that light. Wang Gui wept in his sleep like an old dog. The next morning, before he had even sobered up, he heard Secretary Ma shouting from the yard. "Anyone home? Director Zhao is here." Wang Gui didn't want to respond, but he was afraid his wife would be embarrassed, so he threw on his coat and went outside. This time, there were 3 people: Director Zhao, Secretary Ma, and Lao Biao. Director Zhao was standing with his hands behind his back, inspecting Wang Gui's broken-down car. Wang Gui pointed to the trunk, indicating that everything was inside and they could help themselves. "Uncle Gui, our director is here to personally deliver an invitation." Secretary Ma handed Wang Gui a gilded red invitation with the E-Tiger totem printed on it. Wang Gui didn't take it. Director Zhao took the invitation and handed it to him again. "Uncle Gui, our Liangshan Museum is opening on the 5th of next month, and I sincerely invite you to attend the ribbon-cutting ceremony as the first rural movie projectionist in Liangshan. I hope you can give a speech to mark a new chapter for the cultural development of Michuo County." "I'm not the first, I'm the last," Wang Gui coldly interrupted before he could finish. "Hey, you." Secretary Ma was about to accuse him of being ungrateful, but Director Zhao stopped him. With a smile, Director Zhao walked over, personally shoved the invitation into Wang Gui's coat pocket, and patted the rusty roof of the car. "Uncle Gui, this car has also witnessed the changes in Michuo County over the past decade. The county has already decided to make it an exhibit as well. It'll be placed in the outdoor section of the museum, so we'll be taking the car and everything in it." Wang Gui felt a sharp pain in his heart. The car would become an exhibit? If the car doesn't run, it'll just turn into scrap metal. "No, I won't allow it." Wang Gui refused firmly. Secretary Ma laughed and said, "That's not up to you. No matter how broken it is, this is still a government vehicle, and it must be reclaimed." Wang Gui was speechless. He had never taken advantage of the government his entire life. After he retired, he had paid for the car's repairs out of his own pocket. Seeing him silent, Secretary Ma instructed Lao Biao to drive the van to the museum. IEMO hurriedly brought out the car keys. Lao Biao took the keys, unlocked the car, and was about to get in, but then froze. "Take it away, stop bothering me." Wang Gui waved impatiently. But Lao Biao, still in a daze, asked, Gui, where's everything?" Wang Gui and Secretary Ma almost reached the back of the van at the same time. Secretary Ma lifted the trunk lid in one swift motion, and his expression immediately darkened. Wang Gui also felt a wave of dizziness. Half of the trunk was empty. Both the projector and the screen were gone. Wang Gui pushed Secretary Ma aside and rummaged through the tapes, eventually pulling out a small roll of cash. "Gui Shu, what on earth is going on? Why wasn't the trunk locked?" Secretary Ma was furious. Director Zhao walked over as well, looking equally displeased. "Oh no, what on earth happened? How did the equipment disappear?" Aimo's face turned pale with fear. Hearing her, Secretary Ma reached for his phone to call the police. Wang Gui smacked his head hard. "Damn it, I drank too much at a friend's place last night and forgot to load the stuff onto the van." Aimo stared at him in disbelief, but didn't dare say a word. "This is outrageous. We've already set up the exhibition area. If the equipment's lost, it'll delay everything." Secretary Ma stomped his foot in frustration. Director Zhao waved his hand, signaling for him to calm down. "Don't worry. If the equipment's left in a village, just drive there and retrieve it." Right, you show me the way, and I'll drive myself to pick it up. Secretary Ma pointed to Wang Gui's relative. Without hesitation, Wang Gui named the most distant village from the county. The relative hesitated upon hearing the name. The roads there were treacherous, nearly impassable, and the area was practically deserted. Better not go. It's too risky, the relative said in broken Mandarin. Wang Gui squeezed his wife's hand. I'll go. I've been wandering these mountains my whole life. Nothing's going to happen. Mo tugged at him, motioning for him to put on his coat. As he bent his head to button up, Mo ran back into the house. When she returned, she was holding a faded canvas bag, patched in several places. This silly woman. Why bring out this treasure now? Aren't you afraid the director will confiscate it as public property? Wang Gui teased his wife while half joking, then held up the bag for Director Zhao and Secretary Ma to see. This is the school bag I brought from my hometown in the Northeast when I first started working in the countryside. It originally had 5 large red characters printed on it. Serve the people. Every time I went out to show movies, I used it to carry water and food. Although the words have long since faded, they're etched in my heart, and I lived by them. Now that I won't be needing this bag anymore, I'll donate it to our county museum. After saying that, Wang Gui handed the bag to Director Zhao and climbed into the car. Time spares no one. Back when the county gave him this van, he used to jump right in. Gui Shu, head out early and come back soon. I'll be waiting for you at the museum, Director Zhao reminded him, holding the worn-out canvas bag. Wang Gui ignored him and waved his hand toward his wife, signaling her to go back inside. After leaving the county, Wang Gui headed straight for Jiewu village. He hadn't mentioned it in front of Director Zhao and Secretary Ma, but not only were the projector and screen missing from the car, but also a reel of film. It was the film Abu's grandmother loved most. Asterisk, asterisk, the butterfly lovers, asterisk, asterisk. That roll of cash had been given to Abu the last time Wang Gui went to show a movie. Abu had been to the county a few times in Wang Gui's car and knew where he lived. The more Wang Gui thought about it, the more uneasy he became. Jiewu village was 50 miles from the county, through steep mountains where wild animals roamed. Back when he was young and strong, it had taken him over 4 hours to carry the equipment up there, and Abu was just a kid back then. Wang Gui had no idea what could happen now. After a bumpy ride to Jiewu village, Abu was indeed not at home. Her grandmother, lying on the door plank, had already taken her last breath. Wang Gui touched her dry, withered hand. It was still soft. He took out his tobacco pouch but put it back, then turned and left the dark house, finding some of the relatively younger elderly villagers. The news of Abu's grandmother's death didn't surprise them, though it filled them with a sorrow they couldn't quite express. Several old men, trembling as they leaned on their hoes, dug a pit, waiting for Abu to return and bury her grandmother. An old woman was helping to dress the deceased. Suddenly, she burst into tears, wailing about how her own children hadn't come home in 3 years. She wondered if, when her time came, there would be anyone left to give her a proper burial. Wang Gui had seen many elderly folks burying their peers in these mutual aid funerals, but his eyes still welled up with tears. Abu still hadn't come back. Wang Gui left the van in the village and began retracing his steps along the mountain path. He came across some signs at a cliff's edge. At the bottom of the cliff, strips of tape were hanging from the treetops, twisting like a snake. The cliff was a mess, with wild boar tracks and dried blood. Wang Gui sat down heavily, calling Abu's name in a haunting voice, but there was no response. He wasn't sure how he made it back to the county, only that his wife, Mo, was wringing her hands at the entrance of the town, spotting him from a distance and rushing over. Gui, that child, you need to save the child. What child? Wang Gui gripped his wife's shoulders anxiously. Mo, wiping her tears, explained that the forest ranger in Hawa Town had found an injured child in the mountains. The child was being treated at the county hospital. The ranger didn't know who the child belonged to, but recognized the projector found at the scene as Wang Gui's and came to inform the family. Wang Gui found a sudden surge of energy, abandoning IEMO and rushing to the hospital. The ranger, guarding the emergency room, was furious when he saw Wang Gui. Gui Shu, why let a child carry your equipment? Carry equipment? Wang Gui was momentarily stunned and didn't explain. The child had suffered enough without being further tainted by accusations of theft. Wang Gui stayed with the ranger outside the emergency room, listening to how the ranger had found the child. There had been gunshots and wild boar cries on the mountain. The ranger had chased the sounds and discovered the injured boar being pursued by poachers to the cliff's edge. The boar charged down the cliff, and when the ranger went to investigate, he found the injured child. The child was still conscious when found, saying that his grandmother was waiting for him at home and that he needed to return to cook. Wang Gui covered his face with his hands, tears streaming down his cheeks, unable to find the words to express his sorrow. The doctor finally came out of the emergency room, saying that the child had been stopped by tree branches when he fell and had no broken bones or internal injuries. However, one of his eyes had been injured by a branch and had to be removed. Wang Gui's mouth twitched, unsure whether to laugh or cry. At least the child's life was saved. Thank heavens. But such a beautiful child, now missing an eye, how would he live in the future? Wang Gui suddenly thought of Abu's grandmother, who was still lying cold on the deathbed, waiting for Abu to return and mourn her. However, Abu, just out of surgery, remained unconscious, and the doctor said he would need to be observed in the hospital for at least 2 weeks. Wang Gui decided to ask the ranger to go to Jiewu village and inform them that Abu would be delayed and to proceed with the burial. In the evening, IEMO brought food, and their son arrived as well. It turned out that they had planned to bring him into the city today. Wang Gui had thought last night's drunken state was just a dream. That drink had been a mistake. He hadn't even realized a child had broken into the house and taken away the heavy equipment. If he had known, he would have driven his old van to return the child home, and this disaster might have been avoided. The 72-year-old Wang Gui cried like a child in front of his son. He felt truly old. He had shed more tears in these days than in his entire life combined. "Dad, this isn't your fault." His son comforted him, embracing his shoulders. Not his fault. Whose fault could it be? If he hadn't told Abu he would never show movies again, Abu wouldn't have done something so foolish. Or, if he had never gone to the mountains to show movies, Abu wouldn't have taken such a liking to it. That clever child, who followed him around and understood how to handle the equipment so well. If only he weren't so young, if only he weren't so old, he would have made a great successor. Wang Gui sighed and rambled on, feeling years older by the night. His son insisted on staying with Abu, but Wang Gui refused. He feared that Abu might be frightened by an unfamiliar face and might run away. So he stayed by the bedside, waiting for the little one to wake up. But he was afraid as well, afraid the child might ask, "How is Grandma?" He knew too much and didn't know how to tell the poor child. Before dawn, he couldn't resist the fatigue any longer and took a nap. In his sleep, he felt a warm little hand gently touch his wrinkled cheek. He suddenly opened his eyes. It was Abu, awake, smiling with one eye. Wang Gui quickly straightened up, adjusted the blankets, and went to get some congee from the thermos. Abu shook his head, pushing Wang Gui's hand away. "Go show Grandma a movie. If you show her the movie, she won't die. She always sat at the village entrance waiting for you." Wang Gui's tears welled up again. This poor, foolish child didn't understand that his grandmother wasn't waiting for a movie or the person who showed it. She was waiting for news about her son and daughter-in-law, for a faint but unextinguished hope. But she couldn't hold on any longer and had given up. Wang Gui reassured Abu that someone was taking care of his grandmother, telling him not to worry. Abu asked if someone was also showing movies to his grandmother. Wang Gui said yes. Abu, who had always trusted Wang Gui, lay still without moving. He said he had originally intended to sneak into the city to steal the projector. When Wang Gui had been wailing by the roadside, Abu had taken the opportunity to slip into the van. While moving the equipment, he had heard Wang Gui crying in his sleep. "Why were you crying? Did you miss your son like Grandma missed hers?" Abu didn't yet realize he had lost an eye or his grandmother, so he was still as playful as ever. Wang Gui nodded. "Yes, I miss my son and my home." I was about to cry. Abu blinked his one good eye and asked where his home was. Wasn't it the small courtyard in the county? Wang Gui shook his head and described his hometown to him. Abu understood and nodded, saying he knew what a city looked like from movies. He also mentioned that his parents were in the city and that when he grew up, he would take his grandmother to find them. Then he seemed to realize something and asked Wang Gui why he didn't return to his old home. Wang Gui pointed at Abu's nose and said, "If I leave, we'll show you movies. I'll show them. When I'm out of the hospital, I'll take over your job and let you return home." Abu promised earnestly. On the 5th day of Abu's hospitalization, there was suddenly a cacophony of gongs, drums, and firecrackers outside the window. The nurse, joyfully announcing the news, said the museum had opened and the county now had a tourist attraction. Abu blinked his one eye and asked what a museum and a tourist attraction were. Wang Gui patted his little head and said he would understand when he grew up. With the museum opening and everyone distracted, Wang Gui went home to get some clean clothes and found a notice wedged in the door. The notice accused him of absconding with public property and warned that it might result in a criminal charge and wanted him to return the items to the Cultural Bureau as soon as possible. It was clearly written by Secretary Ma, likely just to scare IEMO. But IEMO had gone into the city the day after Abu was hospitalized, as Wang Gui had arranged. Years ago, when their son went to college and settled in the provincial capital, Wang Gui had intended to bring both IEMO and his son there. However, he had refused to move to the city for the sake of showing movies, so IEMO had stayed with him. He felt he owed his wife a lifetime of happiness and couldn't bear to be a burden any longer. She was also nearing 70 and would miss out on the joys of seeing their grandchildren if she didn't enjoy them soon. Their son had promised to come back to pick them up after Abu was discharged and to help find Abu's mother. But in the vast sea of people, where could they find someone deliberately hiding themselves? On the day Abu was discharged, Wang Gui took him back home in the ranger's vehicle. He waited until they were on the road before telling Abu about his grandmother's passing. Abu bit his lip, unwilling to cry, until he saw his grandmother's new grave and broke down sobbing. After crying for a long time, he asked Wang Gui, "My dad isn't coming back, is he?" Wang Gui, unable to bear adding to his grief, choked up and said it wasn't certain, that they should wait a bit longer. Abu wiped his tears and said he wouldn't wait any longer. If his grandmother had died and his dad hadn't come to see her, he wouldn't wait for him either. Wang Gui tentatively asked if Abu wanted to study in the city, offering to help make arrangements. Abu touched his empty eye socket and shook his head. He had heard from children who had gone to the city that mountain kids were different from city kids. Mountain kids who went to the city were mocked for their dirty faces, outdated clothes, and inability to speak the city dialect. Mountain adults, too, had to do the dirtiest, hardest work in the city and eat the cheapest, worst food. Wang Gui was stunned by the child's awareness and was momentarily at a loss for words. He wanted to tell Abu that it wasn't like that everyone was equal in this world, but he couldn't bring himself to say it. Education is crucial. Knowledge is the only way to change your destiny. Wang Gui told Abu something he had always believed in. But Abu shook his head again, saying there were too many people in the city, and he feared getting lost like his parents and never finding his way back. Wang Gui remained silent for a long time, unable to respond. When it was time to say goodbye, Abu saw him off to the old van. It hadn't started in over half a month, and he wasn't sure if it would even run. Wang Gui opened the van door and was stunned. The projector and the yellowed screen, which had been used for many years, were still inside the van, perfectly intact. The village children excitedly recounted how the miracle had happened. The equipment was delivered by the ranger on the day Abu's grandmother was buried. The ranger had left the items on the van, and the children, following Wang Gui's example, had set everything up. Since no one knew how to drive, and they feared the equipment might be stolen, the village elders took turns guarding it every night for half a month. Wang Gui set up the screen, moved the projector, and placed a reel of film. Everything was intact. Abu said that when he heard the bore, he hid the equipment under a rock and took cover on the other side. He was afraid the bore would damage the projector, preventing his grandmother from ever watching a movie again. Wang Gui hugged him tightly. "You're quite the kid. Do you dare to show a movie for everyone?"
Dare.
Abu straightened his recovering little chest proudly. When the music from The Lion King filled the night sky in Shiwa village again, Wang Gui stood behind the crowd, his eyes unwittingly moist. His successor was so young, it was both heart-wrenching and comforting. Abu went on to attend the county elementary school. Wang Gui told him that without an education, even showing movies would be impossible. But Wang Gui also promised to take him along every weekend when he went out to show films. Wang Gui also took Abu to the newly opened county museum. There was indeed an exhibit titled The Modern Cultural Development History of Liangshan, which included a display for rural mobile movie projection vehicles. However, the glass case held a broken-down projector from who knows where. Wang Gui wanted to leave a note on the display to tell people that the mobile movie projector in Michuo County was still running. But he wasn't like Secretary Ma. He couldn't do that. To his surprise, his faded canvas bag was also among the exhibits. The plaque read, "The first mobile movie projector operator in Michuo County, Wang Gui, carried this backpack for half a century." The bag once had the words "Serve the People" printed on it. Wang Gui said, "These 5 words are engraved in my heart." Wang Gui felt a warm rush of emotion. This director, Zhao, had some depth. Later, when he visited the Cultural Bureau again regarding his retirement pension, he learned that both Director Zhao and Secretary Ma had been transferred back to the city. They were just temporary officials, here to polish their resumes. They built a museum and achieved their political goals, mission accomplished. However, he soon heard that Secretary Ma had been dismissed for his extravagant style and lack of diligence. Especially, a recent article he wrote about rural areas was too unrealistic and didn't accurately reflect the lives of rural people. 2 years later, the county started a village-to-village network project aimed at providing the elderly and children in the mountains with classes, programs, knowledge, and ways to connect with family. The official leading the project was named Zhao, who had previously served as the Cultural Bureau Director in Michuo County and understood the plight of the left-behind elderly and children. By then, Wang Gui was 75. He felt confident he would be able to see it through to that day.